Introducing first from Atlanta, Georgia, 280 pounds, the Fabulous Freebirds, Terry Gordy.
Terry Ray Gordy was born April 23, 1961, to Billy and Mildred Gordy in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Terry and his sister Marshina were both raised in the small town of Rossville, Georgia, about 6 miles outside of Chattanooga, where Terry became a fan of pro wrestling, watching the likes of Jackie Fargo and Tojo Yamamoto. At a very young age, Terry found himself on the wrong side of the law and ended up in jail more than once by the time he was 13 years old. The first time his parents bailed him out, but the second time his uncle J.D. Kyle picked him up with the plan to keep Gordy from going to jail a third time. And Kyle was an outlaw wrestling promoter known by the name Captain Hook and associated with a new promotion called the International Wrestling Association, based out of Cleveland, Ohio. The IWA had already secured notable names like Ernie Ladd and Mel Mascaras by offering them guaranteed money regardless of ticket sales, but they needed more undercard performers. With Terry already well over 200 pounds, Kyle was hoping to use pro wrestling to keep him out of trouble. In the days when state athletic commissions required a license for pro wrestlers, Gordy easily passed for being older than he was thanks to his size. Terry lied about his age and began training, with his primary teachers being veteran wrestlers Don Carson and the Mongolian stopper Archie Goldie. Gordy proved to be a natural in the ring and made his debut just a few months later at only 14 years old. Beginning his career under the name Terry Mecca and introduced as being from New York, Gordy fit right in with the other wrestlers despite barely being out of junior high. Fans were unaware they were watching someone that wasn't even old enough to legally drive a car. Still a student at Rossville High School, Gordy wrestled sporadically his first year, spending part of the summer in Canada, getting valuable seasoning at an age most would-be pro wrestlers were only dreaming of stepping into the ring. In 1976, as Terry was approaching his 15th birthday, an upstart independent promotion based in Tennessee made it easier for the high schooler to continue his wrestling career. It was a bonus that he also got to work for a legend. Lou Thez, a former world's heavyweight champion in the National Wrestling Alliance, founded the Universal Wrestling Association in an attempt to overtake George Goulas's Mid-America territory that was established as part of the NWA. The UWA ran weekly shows in Nashville, as well as regular spot shows in Kentucky and other cities in Tennessee. With shorter trips to cards in the UWA, Terry was able to wrestle more regularly while still attending high school. Gordy actually had two personas in the upstart promotion, appearing as Terry Mecca, as well as a masked wrestler called Mr. Wrestling. Unfortunately, the UWA was short-lived, and by that fall, the writing was on the wall that the promotion wasn't going to make it much longer. Now standing 6 foot 4 inches tall and weighing just under 300 pounds, Gordy made the decision to drop out of high school before his sophomore year began, and became a full-time pro wrestler. Now using his real name, Gordy eventually landed in the Memphis-based Continental Wrestling Association, where he spent most of 1977. As a babyface, Gordy tagged with several young future stars like Robert Gibson, Jim Garvin, and Scott Casey. His first run through a well-established territory was great experience, but Gordy wanted to do more than work the lower mid-card and opening matches. That led to a decision that would play a part in molding the rest of his career. Moving on to the new International Championship Wrestling based in Mississippi, Gordy quickly moved up to card and even won his first championship at just 16 years old. Gordy defeated Bush in the finals of a tournament in Greenwood, Mississippi on January 14, 1978, to become the promotion's first Mississippi heavyweight champion. While his first championship was a sign things were starting to come together for the babyface Gordy, it was a friendship with a heel that changed the direction of his career. Still well within the days of kayfabe, babyfaces and heels generally never associated with each other outside of the matches. By chance, Gordy was working out at the same time as a heel named Michael Seitz, who was wrestling under the name Lord Michael Hayes. Seitz was only about 2 years older than Gordy, and the two became fast friends. After Hayes had spent some time in Germany, he came back to ICW and pitched the idea to Booker Frankie Kane to turn Gordy heel and make them a tag team together. Kane reluctantly agreed, and the team of Hayes and Gordy began drawing big crowds for ICW, but were still only making $40 a night. At a spot show, Hayes disputed his payoff and claimed, based on attendance, he should be making $50 instead of $40. Hayes was told in front of the other wrestlers, including Gordy, if he didn't like his payoff, he could leave. Hayes did, soon followed by Gordy, who sat in the car with Hayes outside the venue and said, "If they don't want you, they don't have me. Where are we going, Michael?" A lifelong friendship was cemented. Where Gordy and Hayes went was back to Tennessee and Nick Goulas's Mid-America territory. They quickly climbed the card and won the Mid-America Tag Team Championship from Bobby Eaton and George Goulas on January 7, 1979 in Chattanooga, marking their first title as a team. Gordy and Hayes feuded with Eaton and Goulas over the tag belts for several weeks and had a verbal war with veteran wrestlers Lynn Rossi and one of Gordy's favorite wrestlers, Jackie Fargo, though it never turned into a meeting in the ring. While Gordy and Hayes were doing well in Mid-America, their stay there was somewhat short. Hayes had long had an idea for a gimmick to use for a tag team, and knew Gordy was the partner he wanted to try it with. While the powers that be in Mid-America weren't keen on the idea, they found promoters in Memphis to be more willing to give it a try. Shortly after dropping the Mid-America tag titles to Gypsy Joe and Tom Renesto Jr. on July 4, 1979, Gordy and Hayes moved on to the CWA. On July 14, 1979, Gordy and Hayes made their debut on CWA television as the Fabulous Freebirds. Introduced as being out of California, Gordy walked onto the set with announcer Lance Russell, with Hayes alongside wearing a towel on his head. And what would be a contradiction to the rest of their careers together, Gordy did all the talking, as he explained to Russell that while he was a rompin' stompin' powerhouse, Michael was too pretty for them to see just yet. Fans wouldn't have to wait long to see Hayes unveiled, as they were scheduled to face main eventers Jerry Lawler and Bill Dundee later in the program in a 2 out of 3 falls match. After much ado, Gordy finally lifted the towel off the head of Hayes, who then tore into a classic Hayes promo as Dundee and Lawler with the perm got a good laugh from the ring. In the match itself, Hayes and Gordy dominated early, with Gordy pinning Dundee for a first fall victory. In the second fall, the Freebirds kept Dundee in the ring for almost 5 minutes, not allowing him to tag out. Finally, Dundee made the tag to Lawler, who evened things out to allow Dundee to get a second fall pin on Hayes. With only about 3 minutes of TV time remaining, the match would end in a draw, with both teams having 1 fall each. But they continued to brawl in and out of the ring, even through a commercial break. The show would end with all 4 men in the ring still fighting. Needless to say, the Fabulous Freebirds made a huge splash with their debut, maybe too big of a splash, for Jerry Lawler. Many people believe Lawler saw the attention Gordy and Hayes were drawing, and saw it as a threat. Lawler was not only the top star in the CWA, but also a part owner, having creative control even when he wasn't also serving as booker. Shortly after the Freebirds hit the scene, Lawler turned himself heel. If Lawler did this to purposely draw away from Gordy and Hayes could be left up to debate, but the fact of the matter is it did. Gordy and Hayes still received something of a push, tearing through a series of tag teams through the summer that included a short feud with Jimmy Valiant and Steve Regal. In September, the Freebirds finally got a shot at the Southern Tag Team Championship held by Larry Latham and Wayne Ferris, but failed to come away with the belts. By November, it was becoming clear there wasn't going to be much for Gordy and Hayes in the CWA, as they lost in a series of tag matches against Ricky Morton and Sonny King, and were given a scant few singles matches mixed in between. While things were looking bleak in Memphis, the Freebirds caught the eye of Mid-South owner Bill Watts, setting the stage for what made the Fabulous Freebirds legends. Watts thought very highly of Terry Gordy, liking his size and seeing him as one of the better workers in the business. While Watts recognized Hayes was great on the mic, he wasn't impressed with his in-ring work. Watts wanted Gordy in Mid-South, but not Hayes. Again showing loyalty to his friend, Gordy told Watts he wasn't getting him without getting Hayes. Luckily, Watts agreed, and once he had Gordy and Hayes in Mid-South, presented them with a compromise. Making their Mid-South debut in November 1979, Gordy and Hayes quickly saw the success they weren't finding in the CWA, winning the Mid-South Tag Team Championship from Watts and Buck Robley on November 25th in New Orleans. Gordy and Hayes had many successful defenses through the end of 1979 and into 1980, all while Bill Watts was cooking up a plan. Watts wanted to add a third member to the Fabulous Freebirds to largely carry the load of work in the ring with Gordy, while Hayes would carry the load of doing promos and essentially become a de facto manager that still wrestled occasionally. Gordy and Hayes were not initially thrilled with the idea, but reluctantly agreed to give it a chance. Watts contacted veteran wrestler Buddy Roberts and added him as the third Freebird. Meeting each other for the first time at the Irish McNeil Boys Club prior to a Mid-South TV taping, there was immediate chemistry between the three. All of them saw how it could work with Hayes as the mouthpiece, Buddy as the technician, and Gordy as the powerhouse. Watts wasted little time getting them to the top of the card. Gordy and Hayes had spent weeks feuding with Buck Robley and the incredibly popular Junkyard Dog over the Mid-South Tag Team titles. Buck and JYD finally took the tag titles from the Freebirds on April 6, 1980, and even saw the conflict spill over into the singles division as Gordy defeated JYD for the Louisiana Heavyweight Championship on May 2nd in Shreveport. Gordy dropped the belt back to JYD just 18 days later in Baton Rouge, but it was all setting things up for the biggest moment of the feud. Gordy and Roberts faced off against Robley and Dog on June 9, 1980 at the Municipal Auditorium in New Orleans, with the tag titles on the line in a no disqualification match. Michael Hayes was at ringside holding a jar containing what came to be known as Freebird hair cream, which was said to be the same hair removal solution Paul Orndorff used in a hair match against Ken Mantell. In a grueling match that lasted more than 30 minutes, Gordy secured the victory and the titles by pinning Robley. Hayes quickly jumped in the ring with the jar of cream and directed Gordy and Roberts to hold Robley. Junkyard Dog stepped in to save his partner, but Hayes turned and ended up smashing the cream into JYD's eyes. The Freebirds ran to the back as Junkyard Dog rolled around the ring in pain. In storyline, the cream had blinded JYD. In the weeks that followed, Watts stoked the fire set by the match by not only telling fans JYD may never regain his sight, but it all came about right before Dog's wife gave birth and he was not able to see his first child. To call what the Freebirds got from fans heat is an understatement. They were getting a nuclear meltdown. More than once, fans were caught coming to the arena armed and ready to confront the birds. One fan was found with a shell that had Freebirds carved into the casing. In the ring, Robley tagged with various partners in attempts to regain the Mid-South tag titles, but never took the belts. Robley even tagged with the visiting Dusty Rhodes in a double bull rope match against Gordy and Roberts at the Superdome Extravaganza in New Orleans on August 2nd, with Gordy and Roberts coming out the losers, though the tag titles were not on the line. On that same card, a still blind JYD wearing goggles faced Hayes in a steel cage dog collar match where the two were connected by a chain with a dog collar placed around both their necks. JYD surprised fans during the match by removing the goggles and revealing that he had regained his sight. On September 15th, Gordy and Roberts dropped the Mid-South tag titles to Junkyard Dog and Terry Orndorff in Chalmette, Louisiana. A few days later in Shreveport, all three Freebirds faced off against Dog, Orndorff, and Bill Watts in a loser leaves town 6-man tag match, which the Freebirds lost. An incredible 10-month run in Mid-South came to an end, and Gordy and the Birds were headed to Georgia Championship Wrestling. In Georgia, the Fabulous Freebirds truly came into full fruition. While they were not the first to use ring entrance music, they are the ones that popularized it, having Leonard Skinner's Freebird playing any time they made an appearance. Wearing flashy ring gear and billing themselves as a new dimension in tag team wrestling, the Freebirds were instant stars on what was becoming a nationally televised wrestling show. Gordy and the Birds hit the ground running in Georgia and were immediately put in marquee matches. The Freebirds won the Georgia Tag Team Championship in their first week in the territory, defeating champions Mr. Wrestling 1 and 2 and the Assassins in a triple threat tag match. Even though it was Gordy and Roberts winning the belts, they would make use of what came to be known as the Freebird Roll, which allowed any combination of Gordy, Hayes, and Roberts to defend the titles. Shortly after winning the belts, the Freebirds started their first feud in Georgia with Kevin Sullivan and Austin Idol. This feud featured the flat tire segment on Georgia Championship Wrestling when Idol was late to the TV studio to serve as a special referee for a match, saying he had a flat tire. Michael Hayes slipped up and exposed the Freebirds' dirty tricks, saying it may have taken a while to fix 4 flat tires. Idol interrupted, saying, "I didn't say I had 4 flat tires. I said I had a flat tire. How did you know I had 4? It was a memorable start to a great feud that carried into December 1980, with Gordy clearly making himself the top contender among the Freebirds when it came to singles competition. The feud with Sullivan and Idol even bled over into a singles match for Gordy as he faced Jack Briscoe for the National Heavyweight Championship, ending when all 3 Freebirds ganged up on Briscoe and were chased away by Sullivan and Idol. After a brief feud with Robert Fuller and Stan Frazier over the Georgia Tag Team Championship, Gordy would be at the center of the Freebirds' next big feud that involved a familiar face. On March 28, 1981, Gordy and Roberts were set to face off against Ted DiBiase and his partner in a televised match from the WTBS studios. That partner happened to be Junkyard Dog, the Freebirds' old foe from Mid-South. Of course, Hayes was at ringside and even showed the infamous jar of hair cream to the cameras, giving the impression something might happen. Something did, but it had nothing to do with the cream. Late in the match, as Roberts and Dog fought on the other side of the ring with the referee trying to break them up, DiBiase was thrown out of the ring near the cameras by Gordy. With Hayes urging him on, Gordy grabbed DiBiase and gave him a pile driver on the concrete floor, busting his head open. As the referee came to that side of the ring, the Freebirds assumed they would get a count-out victory. To everyone's surprise, DiBiase managed to get to the ring apron and roll under the rope before being counted out. As the legal man in the match, Gordy then took DiBiase into the middle of the ring and delivered another pile driver, only for DiBiase to kick out. 2 more times, Gordy gave DiBiase a pile driver, and 2 more times DiBiase kicked out. Gordy was set up for a 5th pile driver when Tommy Rich suddenly hit the ring and began attacking Gordy. The Freebirds officially won the match by disqualification, and Rich was seen explaining what happened to JYD as the Birds headed to the back. DiBiase was out of action for some time, but when he returned, he teamed with various partners trying to win the tag titles, usually against Gordy and Roberts. DiBiase and JYD did defeat Gordy and Roberts in a no DQ, no time limit match at the Omni in Atlanta on May 17th, but it was a non-title match. DiBiase finally took the belts with Steve-O as his partner at a match in Marietta, Georgia on June 11th, but Terry Gordy was not in the match as Hayes and Roberts were defending. The Freebirds then entered an unusual phase of their story. At a match in Columbus, Georgia, Hayes and Roberts lost a loser leaves town tag match against Ted DiBiase and Tommy Rich. After Roberts had a brief stay in Mid-Atlantic, he headed to his home country of Canada, while both Hayes and Gordy had a brief run in Central States before Hayes took some time off. Gordy returned to Atlanta by the end of June and started a tag team with Jimmy Snuka. Gordy and Snuka had a short series of title matches against champions DiBiase and Steve-O, taking the titles on July 6, 1981 at Bell Auditorium in Augusta, Georgia. The 2 teams met in a couple of return matches over the next 2 weeks, including a televised match on July 18th on WTBS. That same day, Michael Hayes would return to Georgia, but with a change of mindset. Hayes appeared at the podium with announcer Gordon Solie saying to the television audience he had spent some time back home. Wanting to be a better role model for his little brother, he was taking a different approach to life in his wrestling career. As far as the future of the Fabulous Freebirds, Hayes referenced the match against Gene and Ole Anderson in which Gordy walked away and left him high and dry. When Gordy and Snuka came out to defend the belts against DiBiase and Steve-O, it seemed calmer heads would prevail. There was no interaction between Gordy and Hayes, who was still at the podium with Solie ready to lend color commentary to the match. A great match between the 2 teams came to an end when Gordy delivered something of an altered pile driver to Steve-O, working sort of like a sit-down powerbomb, with Steve landing on the back of his neck. After Gordy set Steve-O up in the middle of the ring, he tagged in Snuka, who climbed to the top rope to perform his Superfly Splash. Before Snuka could complete the move, Hayes suddenly hit the ring and pushed him off the top rope, then jumped in the ring and attacked Gordy. In a flash, the altercation between Gordy and Hayes went from verbal to physical. The next few weeks would be very busy ones for Gordy. Not only was he deep in the feud with Ted DiBiase and now his former Freebird partner Michael Hayes, as well as defending the tag titles with Snuka, but he also got his first shots at the NWA World Championship. In early August, Dusty Rhodes defended the world title against Gordy, first in Macon, Georgia, and then in Gordy's birthplace of Chattanooga, Tennessee, with Rhodes coming out the winner both times. Meanwhile, Gordy and Snuka successfully defended the tag titles as the focus of the feud shifted from DiBiase to Hayes going into September. Hayes enlisted the help of several partners, including DiBiase, Tommy Rich, Mr. Wrestling 2, and even Kevin Von Erich. Oddly enough, it was the team of Hayes and former Oakland Raiders defensive lineman Otis Sistrunk that would dethrone Gordy and Snuka, winning the tag titles on September 27, 1981, in a steel cage match at the Omni in Atlanta. By October, both Snuka and Sistrunk were gone from the territory, not only vacating the tag team titles, but leaving Gordy and Hayes to settle their feud on their own. The 2 would face off in a variety of matches, including lumberjack and taped fist matches. Playing off Hayes calling Gordy Baby Huey, the 2 would face off in a series of loser must drink from a baby bottle matches through the end of October. Gordy lost to Hayes in most of the matches, including all of the baby bottle matches, but did come away with a win in a lumberjack match in Augusta, and in a regular singles match in Columbus. By January of 1982, it was time to bring the Freebirds back together, but not before they took their feud on the road. After brief runs in Mid-Atlantic, both Gordy and Hayes popped up in the Alabama-based Southeastern Championship Wrestling. Gordy immediately clashed with Alabama heavyweight champion Jimmy Golden, defeating Golden for the title on February 21, 1982 in Pensacola, Florida. The title would be the centerpiece of the continued feud, as Gordy's first 3 title defenses were against Hayes, leading to a payoff match between the two on April 24, 1982 in Dothan, Alabama. The match would not only be for the Alabama Championship, but would be a Texas death match in a steel cage, with the loser being forced to leave the territory. The bloody street brawl between Gordy and Hayes ended with both men down on opposite sides of the ring. When he came to Alabama, Gordy had aligned himself with Joe LeDuc and the Kiwi Sheepherders, Jonathan Boyd and Luke Williams. The Sheepherders came to ringside as both men were getting to their feet, and as Gordy distracted the referee, Boyd threw powder in Hayes' face. Gordy then delivered 2 pile drivers to Hayes to win the match, meaning Hayes would have to leave the territory. After the match, the Sheepherders came into the ring, and Luke Williams pulled out a pair of scissors, handing them to Gordy. While the Sheepherders held an unconscious Hayes, they urged Gordy to cut Hayes' signature long blonde hair. Gordy hesitated, then backed away, making it clear he didn't want to do it. Joe LeDuc then entered the cage, taking the scissors from Gordy, and started to cut Hayes' hair, but was stopped by Gordy, who then throttled LeDuc and the Sheepherders single-handedly. Later, Gordy interrupted the post-match interview with Hayes, ending with the future between the two up in the air. Hayes would leave the territory, but Gordy would stay in Southeastern for 2 more months to wrap things up. On May 17th and 18th, Gordy faced Ric Flair for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, but lost to Flair both times. On June 1st, Gordy lost the Alabama Heavyweight Championship to Joe LeDuc in Mobile, Alabama. 6 days later in Birmingham, LeDuc defended the title against Gordy in the loser leaves town match, which Gordy lost. A few days later, Gordy made a surprise appearance in Georgia. In something of a callback to the June 5, 1982 taping of Georgia Championship Wrestling, Michael Hayes was set to tag with Kevin Sullivan against Buzz Sawyer and the Super Destroyer. Hayes came out saying Sullivan hadn't shown up, but he would be willing to take on either Sawyer or Destroyer in a singles match. Sawyer and Destroyer insisted Hayes take on both of them by himself. Suddenly, Terry Gordy came from the back, and he and Hayes hit the ring together to clean house. After more than a year of storytelling in 3 different territories, Gordy and Hayes were together again. For this stretch in Georgia, Gordy was established to fans as his own man. He wasn't just a background piece standing behind Michael Hayes. He was a dominating presence in the ring that could cut a pretty good promo himself. Gordy and Hayes wasted little time getting back into the title picture, defeating John Studd and the Super Destroyer for the National Tag Team Championship on July 2, 1982 in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Through the summer of 1982, Gordy and Hayes would have an on-again, off-again program with the Wild Samoans Afa and Sika, as well as taking on various combinations of Buzz Sawyer, the Super Destroyer, and Jake Donovan. Their primary feud through the summer was with NWA World Tag Team Champions Ole Anderson and Stan Hansen, giving fans the first real look at Gordy and Hansen in the ring against each other. That feud would culminate on August 15, 1982 at the Omni, with the national tag titles on the line as Gordy and Hayes defeated Anderson and Hansen in a steel cage match. On August 29, 1982 at the Omni in Atlanta, Gordy and Hayes dropped the national tag team championship to the Wild Samoans. With both men wanting to remain established on their own as well as a team, Hayes made the faithful decision to leave the territory for what may have been intended as a temporary stay in Dallas. Meanwhile, Gordy remained in Georgia and teamed with partners as varied as Tito Santana and Andre the Giant in unsuccessful attempts to win back the National Tag Team Championship. By October, Hayes had contacted both Gordy and Buddy Roberts and told them to pack their bags and get to Texas, where the territory was already hot and Booker Gary Hart had a plan to make it hotter. After a short stop in Mid-South, Terry headed into Dallas and World Class Championship Wrestling. Terry Gordy made his world-class debut on October 25, 1982 at Will Rogers Memorial Coliseum in Fort Worth in a tag team match partnering with Michael Hayes as they defeated Bill Irwin and El Gran Marcus. The Freebirds established themselves as a 3-man unit when Roberts came into the territory on October 29th. The Freebirds were an immediate hit as babyfaces in World Class, drawing as big of a positive reaction from the crowd as hometown heroes the Von Erichs. Even though it was Kevin Von Erich that actually did work with Hayes and Gordy a year earlier in Georgia, the Freebirds were presented to fans as friends of David Von Erich, who had recently returned from a run in Florida. Gordy and Roberts would only appear sporadically through the first couple of months in Dallas, with Terry spending much of November in Mid-South, but Gordy and Hayes did win the American Tag Team Championship from Bill Irwin and King Kong Bundy on November 26th in Dallas. Going into December 1982, the Freebirds were far and away the most popular non-Von Erichs in the territory. So much so, Michael Hayes easily won a poll among fans to see who would be the special referee for Kerry Von Erich's match against NWA World Champion Ric Flair at Christmas Star Wars 1982. The match was set to take place in a steel cage, and Hayes added that Terry Gordy would be at ringside as the keeper of the key. The Freebirds were already on the card Christmas night at Reunion Arena, facing Ben Sharp, Mike Sharp, and Tom Steele, the crowned new World Six-Man Tag Team Champions. Gordy and Hayes came to the ring that night without Buddy Roberts, announcing to the crowd Roberts' flight had been delayed and he couldn't make it in time. Gordy and Hayes were going to go into the match with a 2-on-3 disadvantage, but David Von Erich came from the back and volunteered to take Roberts' place. Not only did David help the Freebirds win the six-man championship, but he scored the winning pinfall in the match. In a post-match interview, David announced he would relinquish his third of the title to Roberts. The next match on the card was the main event, Kerry challenging for the world title against Flair. Referee David Manning would still be the primary referee, but Hayes was in place as a special second referee. Hayes had to be admonished by Manning several times in the match for getting too rough while enforcing the rules, which increasingly made Hayes and Gordy upset. Around the 20-minute mark of the match, as Kerry had Flair in the Iron Claw, Flair's foot brushed the rope. Hayes demanded the hold be broken, while Manning told him Flair's foot simply touched the rope, which didn't call for a break. Hayes ignored him and pulled Kerry off Flair by the hair. As Kerry and Hayes argued, Flair came up and hit Kerry from behind. Gordy was livid on the outside of the cage and opened the door for Hayes to leave, but Hayes chose to stay. As Flair continued to pummel Von Erich, Hayes tried to break the two apart, but was continually shoved back by Flair. Finally, Hayes hit Flair and knocked him almost unconscious. Hayes shoved Manning aside and tried to get Kerry to pin Flair, but Kerry refused, not wanting to win the world title that way. Again, Gordy opened the cage door, and this time Hayes started to leave. Kerry stopped him by the door to argue, as Flair again came up from behind and hit Kerry in the back with a knee. That sent Kerry into Hayes, knocking him to the Reunion Arena floor. As Kerry leaned out between the ropes to check on Hayes, Terry Gordy delivered the shot heard around the wrestling world, slamming the cage door on Kerry's head.
Oh! Kerry Von Erich hit in the head with a cage door!
It was the start to one of the most famous feuds in pro wrestling history, the Von Erichs versus the Freebirds. While Gordy and the Freebirds still had their fans, they instantly became the most hated wrestlers in world class, with chants of "Go Home Freebirds" filling the air when they made an appearance. While the Freebirds weren't getting the same kind of heat from fans they did in Mid-South, it was plenty warm in the Metroplex for the Birds going into 1983. Not that any was needed, but a little spice would be added in January when Gordy defeated Kevin Von Erich for the American Heavyweight Championship at the Sportatorium. Gordy would also get his own shot at the NWA World's title on February 4th, 1983, providing the unusual sight of world-class fans cheering for Ric Flair. The first meeting between all of the Freebirds and the Von Erichs came on February 13th as Kevin, David, and Kerry defeated Gordy, Hayes, and Roberts, and the first of many six-man tag matches to come. Through the early part of 1983, the Birds and Von Erichs faced off in lumberjack matches and Texas tornado matches. Gordy also lost to David in the Texas Death Match on March 7th in Fort Worth, and dropped the American Heavyweight Championship back to Kevin on March 12th at the Sportatorium. The Freebirds and Von Erichs finally met for the World Six-Man Tag Team Championship on March 14th in Fort Worth. The Birds came out winners in that first meeting for the title, but there would be plenty more over the next couple of years. While Gordy won the Texas Brass Knucks title from the Great Kabuki in June, a week before he and Hayes lost the American tag titles to Kerry Von Erich and Bruiser Brody, most eyes were fixed on the Six-Man Tag Team Championship. The Von Erichs finally dethroned the Freebirds at the Independence Day Star Wars card, winning the World Six-Man Tag titles at the Tarrant County Convention Center in Fort Worth. The Von Erichs' reign would be relatively short, with Gordy and the Birds winning the tag titles back on August 12th at the Sportatorium in Dallas. With the feud in full swing and showing no signs of slowing down, Terry Gordy made an important decision that flavored the rest of his career. Taking a break from world class through the end of August 1983, Gordy made his first trip to Japan for All Japan Pro Wrestling Super Power Series. In Japan, Gordy was part of a dream team with Stan Hansen as they faced off against teams like Genichiro Tenryu and Jumbo Tsuruta, as well as being in a six-man tag match, tagging with Hanson and Bruiser Brody against Giant Baba, Dory Funk Jr., and Terry Funk. The Japanese crowd was immediately enthralled with Gordy, and having him tag with another big American like Hanson only added to the experience. Gordy would return to Dallas, but the reception and reaction from the crowd in Japan, as well as the big money, meant it would not be the last time Gordy would be going to the Island Kingdom. Returning to world class, Gordy was thrust right back into the Freebirds feud with the Von Erichs at the 1983 Labor Day Star Wars card at the Tarrant County Convention Center in Fort Worth. Gordy challenged David Von Erich for the Texas Heavyweight Championship, but lost in the best 2 out of 3 falls match. Later on the card, Gordy and the Birds got the best of David and his brothers as the Freebirds successfully defended the World Six-Man Tag title against the Von Erichs. Gordy also unveiled what would become a signature move for him in world class, using the Oriental Spike for the first time. The Freebirds held the six-man title through most of 1983, but after a series of country whipping and elimination matches, a wrench would be thrown into the Freebirds' plans. Michael Hayes lost in a loser leaves town steel cage match to Kerry Von Erich at the Thanksgiving Day Star Wars card at Reunion Arena, and would not be allowed to wrestle in Texas for a year. In the aftermath of that match, as both Von Erichs and Freebirds hit the ring, Fritz Von Erich slammed the cage door on Terry Gordy's head. It was a seemingly appropriate conclusion to the story, but the story wasn't even close to being over. Gordy and Roberts were forced to find a replacement for Hayes in a title defense against the Von Erichs on December 2nd at the Sportatorium. For some reason, that replacement was NWA World Champion Ric Flair. Flair took the pin to lose the six-man title for the Freebirds. All this led to another loser leaves town match, this time putting Gordy and Buddy Roberts against Kevin and Mike Von Erich at the 1983 Christmas Star Wars card at Reunion Arena. For the stipulations of the no disqualification match, if the Freebirds lost, whichever one of them lost the fall would have to leave Texas for a year. Mike had just made his debut a month earlier, so if the Von Erichs lost, Kevin would have to leave no matter who lost the fall. Gordy would end up taking the pin and would be forced to leave Texas as Hayes did, leaving Roberts as the only Freebird still in the territory. In reality, at a time the great majority of fans would never have known, Hayes and Gordy were going on a month-long tour of Japan. The loser leaves town matches were simply a way of explaining their absence. Gordy and Hayes mostly took losses as they faced off against the biggest stars in Japan, including a count-out loss when they challenged for the NWA International Tag Team Championship, held by Giant Baba and Jumbo Tsuruta. At the end of January 1984, it was time for Gordy and Hayes to come back to world class. In a Phantom match announced as being held somewhere in Georgia, the Von Erichs lost the six-man tag title to the Freebirds. Fans were told the Birds insisted the DQ rule be waived for the match, meaning if the Von Erichs were disqualified, they would lose the title. Kevin, David, and Kerry readily agreed, not knowing the Iron Claw had been banned in Georgia. As soon as Kevin applied the hold to Gordy in the match, the Von Erichs were disqualified, and the Freebirds took the six-man title. The Von Erichs were forced to petition to allow Gordy and Hayes to return to Texas if they were going to get a fair chance at getting the six-man title back. Unfortunately, World Class and the Freebirds Von Erich feud took a massive blow just a couple of weeks after Gordy and Hayes returned. On February 2, 1984, Terry lost by disqualification to David Von Erich at the Sportatorium, marking the last time the two were in the ring together. While on the tour of Japan himself, just 6 days later, David Von Erich passed away from acute enteritis. The Freebirds and Von Erichs would continue to battle, but a huge part of the dynamic was gone with the passing of David. For Gordy specifically, he lost his counterpart, as Gordy and David were the two biggest and arguably best of the two factions. A seed had been planted the previous October when Hayes butted heads with Skandar Akbar and Devastation Incorporated, but there hadn't been much of a follow-up. The Freebirds began feuding with Akbar's group, essentially creating a triangle feud, as the Von Erichs had feuded with Akbar for years as well. This not only gave Gordy the chance to have some wild matches against the likes of Kamala and the Missing Link, but there would be the introduction of another piece of the pie. With David gone and Kerry facing Ric Flair for the NWA World Championship at the first David Von Erich Memorial Parade of Champions on May 6, 1984 at Texas Stadium, Fritz Von Erich temporarily came out of retirement to team with Kevin and Mike. The father and son's combination defeated the Freebirds for the World Six-Man Tag Team title in a Come As You Are Bad Street match, but at the end of the match, a new ally for the Freebirds was introduced. Killer Khan hit the ring and put the Oriental Spike on Kevin. Khan would later be revealed as the person that taught Gordy the Spike and, though not officially a Freebird, essentially gave the Birds a fourth member. The night after the Parade of Champions, Gordy had the honor of being the challenger in Kerry Von Erichs' first defense of the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship, losing to him in just over 16 minutes. In fact, Gordy would be the opponent in Kerry's first two title defenses, also facing Kerry in Muskogee, Oklahoma on May 8th. Through the summer of 1984, things became complicated when Killer Khan turned on Gordy and joined Akbar's Devastation Incorporated, creating another violent, bloody feud. Gordy and the Freebirds were in the unusual position of essentially being main event tweeners, being mostly booed as they faced the Von Erichs in a lumberjack match, then being mostly cheered a few nights later when they faced Khan and the Missing Link in a Texas Tornado match. By August, with the Von Erich feud having been going for more than a year and a half, Gordy, Hayes, and Roberts were needing a change of scenery. What started in the cage would seemingly end in a cage when the Freebirds lost the Loser Leaves Town Steel Cage Elimination match at the 1984 Labor Day Star Wars card in Fort Worth. After a history-making run in world class, Gordy and the Freebirds were headed to the World Wrestling Federation. With the WWF's Rock and Wrestling Connection still in full swing and Michael Hayes having some success with the Bad Street USA single in Dallas, it seemed like a prime time to go to New York. Gordy, Hayes, and Roberts had actually dipped their toes in the WWF waters in early August with a couple of house shows and had already appeared on WWF television at Madison Square Garden. The TV appearance even came with an appearance by Cyndi Lauper and music producer Dave Wolf. Despite the high-profile TV debut, when the Freebirds moved their base to the WWF in September, things immediately started turning sideways. There are various stories as to what happened, and all of them may have some merit. There was an apparent backstage conflict with Andre the Giant, plus the fact that the WWF wanted to break the Freebirds up as they were not high on Buddy Roberts. When the Birds appeared on TV, it would be in six-man matches, but it was only Gordy and Hayes appearing in house shows, usually against the Moondogs. Whatever the conflict was between the Freebirds and the WWF, at the end of September, they were on the road again. Ironically, without losing a match in their roughly month-long stay. All three Freebirds would go on a long tour of Japan starting in October. Gordy and Hayes challenged Genichiro Tenryu and Jumbo Tsuruta for the International Tag Team Championship on October 10th, but failed to win the titles. Gordy also faced Tsuruta for the International Heavyweight Championship in Tokyo on October 29th, but lost by disqualification when Hayes came from the back and attacked Tsuruta. In November, the Freebirds came back to the United States and, after a quick stop in Central States Wrestling, temporarily went their separate ways. Hayes went to his home state of Florida, while Gordy and Roberts would return to World Class for a run through the end of 1984. And now an unlikely babyface in Dallas, Gordy picked up where he left off with Killer Khan, leading to one of the bloodiest matches in World Class history at the 1984 Thanksgiving Day Star Wars card in Dallas. With Kerry Von Erich serving as the special referee, Gordy was busted open and getting pummeled early in the match. Gordy came back, busting Khan's head open on the ring post. After pinning Khan twice, it appeared Khan would not be able to answer the 10 count, and manager Skandar Akbar attempted to get in the ring but was cut off by Von Erich. The Missing Link came running from the back and attacked Gordy, but Gordy and Von Erich both disposed of Link, Akbar, and Khan. Von Erich told the crowd that by his estimation, Khan would not have answered the 10 count, and declared Gordy the winner. Von Erich offered to shake Gordy's hand, but Terry refused. When Von Erich left the ring and started toward the back, Gordy grabbed the house mic and said, "Von Erich, if you have any guts, you'll get back in the ring." Kerry immediately came back, and Gordy offered his hand. Von Erich and a Freebird shaking hands in the middle of the ring in Dallas. Gordy and Roberts' brief stay in World Class came to an unusual end. At the 1984 Christmas Star Wars card, a Loser Leaves Town Tornado match was set. Skandar Akbar, the Missing Link, and a mystery partner referred to as Mr. X would face Gordy and Roberts partnering with Chick Donovan, who had been feuding with Akbar in recent weeks. Originally, Mr. X was announced to be Killer Khan, but Khan abruptly left the territory sometime after losing a cage match to Gordy at the Sportatorium. When Christmas night rolled around, Mr. X turned out to be a masked wrestler no one had seen before. It's believed the man under the mask was wrestler Mike York, who world-class fans likely wouldn't recognize even if he wasn't wearing a mask. In the match, all men were legal in the ring at the same time, and everyone who lost by pin or submission or was thrown over the top rope would have to leave the territory. In the end, Gordy was the last man standing, the only one not to get pinned or thrown out. All the same, Gordy only stayed in World Class for a couple more weeks, After losing to Ric Flair in a match for the NWA World Championship at the Sportatorium on January 11th, Gordy reunited with Hayes and Roberts in championship wrestling from Florida. Coming in as a babyface, Terry was immediately thrust into a feud as Hayes had been having problems with a faction consisting of Crusher Khrushchev, the Saint, and Jim Neidhart. Shortly after Gordy's arrival, Boris Zukov replaced Neidhart, who left for the WWF. The short program ran through January of 1985 with a series of steel cage matches, mostly coming to a conclusion when the Freebirds won a loser of the Fall Leaves Town steel cage match in Miami Beach on January 30th, with Khrushchev taking the pin. Gordy played prominently as the Freebirds proved one feud wasn't enough over the next few weeks. After Gordy unmasked the Saint, another masked wrestler, the Masked Assassin, attacked Michael Hayes at ringside. This led to a series of matches between Gordy and Hayes against Assassins 1 and 2, as well as the Assassin and the Saint. The Assassin was taken into the Pringle dynasty run by Percy Pringle III, broadening the Freebirds' opponents and matching Gordy up with the Missing Link for another series of matches. The Freebirds battled Pringle's men until March, when there was a sudden and unexpected heel turn by Gordy, Hayes, and Roberts. During a TV taping, Gordon Soley was interviewing Mike Graham when the Freebirds suddenly appeared at the podium ready for their scheduled interview. During some confusion over whose interview time it was, the argument escalated, and Graham tried to leave but was cut off by Roberts before all three Freebirds jumped Graham, busting his head open before Brian Blair and Bugsy McGraw came from the back to break things up. It was a heel turn that was so sudden, the Freebirds literally went from facing the Assassin and the Missing Link one night to a six-man tag match against Graham, Blair, and McGraw the next. Gordy and Roberts even found themselves tagging with Rick Rude from Percy Pringle's stable, who replaced an absent Michael Hayes for a match in Miami Beach just a few days later. The feud would go into April with Wahoo McDaniel getting involved. In the middle of April, Blackjack Mulligan would join the fray, tagging with Graham in a Texas Tornado match in Lakeland, and beating Gordy in a pair of bunkhouse matches in Tampa and Miami Beach. By the end of April, the Freebirds were on the move again. First with a stop in Dallas for the second annual David Von Erich Memorial Parade of Champions, where Gordy faced Kamala in a singles match, and all three Freebirds actually teamed with the Von Erichs in a two-ring 12-man match. Hayes and Roberts were then off to the American Wrestling Association. For Gordy, it was a 2-month tour of Japan that included several matches against former friend and foe Killer Khan, and another unsuccessful bid for the International Heavyweight Championship against Jumbo Tsuruta. In the middle of June 1985, Gordy joined his Freebird brothers in the AWA. The Freebirds quickly entered into a feud with the Road Warriors over the AWA World Tag Team Championship, with Gordy and Hayes getting their first shot at those titles on July 19, 1985, at Meadowlands Arena. That match would end in a double disqualification, and it would be 3 months before Gordy and Hayes got another match for the tag titles. The Road Warriors won the second meeting at the AWA Super Clash in Chicago by disqualification over Hayes and Gordy, though Hayes and Roberts did play a part in dethroning the Road Warriors. The night after Super Clash, the two Freebirds interfered in the Warriors match against Jim Garvin and Steve Regal, helping Garvin and Regal take the tag team titles. Through the summer of 1985, the Freebirds also appeared in the AWA-affiliated CWA, where they feuded with Jerry Lawler and Austin Idol, and in the AWA-NWA Combined Effort Pro Wrestling USA. Gordy got 2 shots at AWA World Champion Rick Martel, with the first match on August 15th and the second on September 3rd, both in Atlantic City, and both ending in a time-limit draw. While the AWA had just started airing on ESPN and the national exposure was good, Gordy was frustrated with Vern Gagne's booking and waiting very long periods of time between marquee matches. The AWA was also still primarily older wrestlers with a slower pace. While Hayes and Roberts would tough it out in the AWA, Gordy would do another tour of Japan, where he wrestled almost every day through October and the first week of November. When he returned to the AWA, it became clear nothing was going to change, so the Freebirds decided to see if they could reignite things in world class. Returning to Dallas just before Christmas, the Freebirds would again be heels and face off against Kevin Carey and Lance Von Erich in a lights-out match at the 1985 Christmas Star Wars card. Going into 1986, the Freebirds regained the World Six-Man Tag Team Championship, defeating Kevin and Carey with Brian Adias at the Sportatorium on January 23rd. Gordy was involved in some great matches, not only against Von Erichs, but also facing the likes of Bruiser Brody and Iceman King Parsons. Things were also changing on the landscape of pro wrestling. After a tour of Japan in which Gordy made another unsuccessful bid for Jumbo Tsuruda's International Heavyweight Championship, Gordy returned to Dallas in mid-March, and what was now the World Class Wrestling Association, as World Class broke away from the NWA. By May, Gordy again heard Japan calling. At the third annual Memorial Parade of Champions, the Freebirds lost the six-man title to Kerry and Lance Von Erich, with Steve Simpson subbing for an injured Kevin Von Erich. With the title picture cleared up, Buddy and Michael headed to the former Mid-South territory, now known as the Universal Wrestling Federation, while Terry made what might be his most important trip to Japan at that point. On May 17, 1986, in Yokosuka, Japan, Gordy challenged for the PWF Heavyweight Championship against champion Riki Choshu. Many point to this match as when Gordy truly earned the name Ningen Garai, which is Japanese for human torpedo. Making one of the wildest entrances ever seen as he ran through the crowd tossing chairs, sending fans scurrying, Gordy and Choshu had a violent and very stiff match that only lasted just over 12 minutes, but it may have taken spectators at least that long to catch their breath once it was over. Gordy would lose the match, but he also solidified himself as a star in Japan. Returning to the U.S. at the end of May 1986, Gordy joined Hayes and Roberts in the UWF. Bill Watts had always loved Gordy's work and likely had nobody he wanted more as the first champion of his new federation. Gordy's first appearance in the UWF was at Sam Houston Coliseum in Houston, Texas, as part of the tournament to crown a new UWF heavyweight champion. Gordy defeated Koko B. Ware in the first round, Ted DiBiase in the quarterfinals, Steve Williams in the semifinals, and finally Jim Duggan in the finals to win the tournament. For the first time in his career, Gordy was a top champion in the company. Gordy was an active champion in the first month of his reign. Terry's first defense came at the UWF TV taping at the Convention Center in Tulsa, Oklahoma on June 8, 1986, a time-limit draw against Duggan. Over the next month, Gordy defended against DiBiase 2 times, Williams 2 times, and Terry Taylor 4 times, scoring the victory in every match. Even as the Freebirds feuded with the Fantastics and had street fight matches against Watts, DiBiase, and Taylor, Gordy successfully defended the UWF Championship, only put on pause for another short run in Japan in late August and early September. Gordy wanted to spend more time in Japan, where he was not only becoming a huge star, but making incredible money. While Watts loved Gordy's work, he could not have his champion flying off to Japan every few weeks, where they didn't even recognize the UWF Championship. Watts' hand was forced to take the belt off Gordy, but it was done in an unusual way. At a TV taping in Tulsa, Oklahoma on November 9, 1986, Gordy's arm was injured in a confrontation with Steve Williams, Ted DiBiase, and Terry Taylor. When it was time for Gordy's UWF Championship defense later that night against One Man Gang, Michael Hayes came to the ring with him. Hayes took the house mic to tell the referee and the crowd that Gordy would not be defending the title tonight due to the injury. The referee then declared that Gordy forfeited and awarded the belt to Gang, leaving a stunned Gordy in the ring. Leaving the UWF behind for the time being, Gordy spent the rest of November and first half of December in Japan, participating in the Real World Tag League, a tournament that was considered the gold standard of tag team competition in Japan. Gordy reunited with Killer Khan for the tournament, where they finished a respectable 5th among the 9 teams involved. And going into 1987, Gordy split time between the UWF and Japan. In April of 1987, Bill Watts sold the financially unstable UWF to Jim Crockett Promotions, who kept the UWF brand name alive until December, but Gordy spent July as part of the Great American Bash tour. Gordy was not only still a part of the Freebirds, but also began a notable partnership with his former foe Steve Williams, as they feuded with Dick Murdoch and Eddie Gilbert. In October, Gordy began a very active 2-month stint in Japan, tagging with the likes of Nikita Koloff and even with Jumbo Tsuruda, but was also very active in singles matches against John Tenta and the Great Kabuki. The highlight of that run in Japan came in November when Gordy teamed with Stan Hansen for the 1987 Real World Tag League. Gordy and Hansen had incredible matches against Bruiser Brody and Jimmy Snuka, Dory Funk Jr. and Terry Funk, the Great Kabuki and John Tenta, and an absolute barn burner against Ashura Hara and Junichiro Tenryu. Gordy and Hansen finished the tournament in a 4-way tie for second place. In what could be considered going from one extreme to the other, Gordy followed the incredible 2 months in Japan with a return to the World Class Wrestling Association, who were struggling to draw crowds. With Michael Hayes still with Crockett Promotions, Gordy and Roberts came to World Class with a revamped version of the Freebirds that included the now heel Iceman King Parsons and an associate in the Angel of Death. The alternate version of the Freebirds made their first appearance at what would become an infamous 1987 Christmas Star Wars card at Reunion Arena. Gordy, Roberts, and Parsons lost in a steel cage match against Kevin Von Erich, Steve Simpson, and Chris Adams to fill the vacant World Six-Man Tag Team Championship, but how the night ended is why the card is remembered. Prior to the WCWA World Title match between champion Al Perez and challenger Kerry Von Erich, the Freebirds came to the ring and delivered a beatdown to a then 58-year-old Fritz Von Erich, with Gordy primarily keeping Kerry occupied. It came to be known as the Fritz Von Erich heart attack angle, despite the fact that there was never any claim Fritz had a heart attack. The obvious intention was to try and create another incident to reboot the feud that started on Christmas Day 5 years earlier. It didn't really work, as attendance remained low and left a bad taste in the mouth of many people in World Class. Gary Hart, for one, was very vocal in his opposition to the angle. The crowds would pick up a bit in the next several weeks, helped by the World Class merger with the outlaw promotion Wild West Wrestling, creating a surge of new talent. Michael Hayes also returned to World Class, but made it clear he was there for his music career, not to wrestle. Gordy accepted Hayes' decision at first, but eventually it led to a feud between Gordy and the new Freebirds and Hayes, who aligned himself with the Von Erichs. The feud ended at the 5th Annual Memorial Parade of Champions in a Triple Dome of Terror match between Gordy and Hayes. In something of a retelling of the first feud between Gordy and Hayes in 1981, Gordy won the match and was prompted by Buddy Roberts and Angel of Death to cut Hayes' hair. He refused, then turned on Roberts and Death, cutting Buddy's hair instead. Instead of reuniting the Freebirds, this time it marked the dismantling of them. While Hayes feuded with Roberts and formed a new tag team with Steve Cox, Gordy formed an alliance with Steve and Sean Simpson. Gordy's last match in World Class came at the 1988 Cotton Bowl Extravaganza on October 15th, a dog collar match against the Botswana Beast that ended in a double countout. Gordy's real highlights in 1988 came in Japan. Gordy spent all of July working for All Japan Pro Wrestling, and on July 29th he and Stan Hansen defeated Jumbo Tsuruta and Yoshiaki Yatsu for the AJPW World Tag Team Championship. They only held the titles for 2 days before dropping them back to the former champions, but Gordy and Hansen were only the second team in history to hold those tag belts. The fact that it was a team consisting of 2 Americans was notable and a sign of how highly regarded both men were in Japan. Gordy and Hansen teamed again for the Real World Tag League in November 1988, going undefeated in the tournament and winning over Junichiro Tenryu and Toshiaki Kawada in the finals to be crowned tournament champions. Gordy had not completely abandoned working in the U.S., popping back up in World Championship Wrestling as another version of the Freebirds formed that included longtime associate Jimmy Garvin. The Freebirds clashed with the Road Warriors, the Midnight Express, and Steve Williams through 1989, but Japan became Gordy's primary place to work. As the 1990s rolled around, Gordy found what might be his greatest success, and it was also the beginning of his hardest fall. After a somewhat lackluster finish in the 1989 Real World Tag League, where he partnered with Bill Irwin, Gordy actually started the 1990s with a one-time appearance in the small Tri-State Wrestling Alliance at the TWO Winter Challenge in Philadelphia. That one match with Bam Bam Bigelow ended in a double countout, and Gordy was back on the plane to Japan, where he reached possibly his greatest moment as a singles wrestler. Partnering with his on-again, off-again foe of many years, Steve Williams, Gordy became a 2-time AJPW World Tag Team Champion on March 6th, when he and Williams defeated Stan Hansen and the Junichiro Tenryu in Tokyo. Known as the Miracle Violence Connection, Gordy and Williams enjoyed a 135-day title reign, losing the belts to Jumbo Tsuruta and the Great Kabuki on July 19th. Gordy would also have possibly his greatest moment as a singles wrestler. After several failed attempts to win the International Heavyweight Championship from Jumbo Tsuruta over the years, Gordy finally defeated Tsuruta for the Triple Crown title on June 5, 1990. Gordy's first title reign would only last 3 days before he dropped the belt to his former partner Stan Hansen, but Gordy regained the belt on July 17th. Gordy was finally recognized for succeeding on his own in Japan, not as part of a trio or someone's partner, but as Terry Gordy. As a nice addition to the new decade, Gordy had family nearby, as his nephew Richard was appearing in AJPW as Richard Slinger and tagging with Gordy and Williams in six-man matches. At what could be considered the peak of his career, fresh off a long tag title reign and the current Triple Crown champion, Terry Gordy almost lost it all. After returning to Tokyo after a match where he and Williams defeated Stan Hansen and Terry Taylor, Gordy stopped at a local bar where he collapsed. Gordy was taken to the hospital by ambulance where he reportedly suffered a cardiac arrest. Terry's condition was so bleak, All Japan Pro Wrestling officials prepared themselves for the possibility they would have to announce Gordy's death. However, Gordy regained consciousness and began to recover. AJPW would have Gordy relinquish the Triple Crown title, and though he would return to the ring a month later, he never received another match for the championship. Despite what seemed to be a near-death experience, Gordy wouldn't appear to lose a step as he and Williams reached near legend status that November in the Real World Tag League 1990. The Miracle Violence Connection won the tournament, edging Stan Hansen and Dan Spivey in the tournament final on December 7th, and making Gordy a two-time tournament champion. The Miracle Violence Connection continued to have success over the next 2 years. Gordy and Williams repeated as Real World Tag League champions in 1991, marking the first time a team won in back-to-back years. Many people believe the tournament final against Super Generation Army was the best match of Terry Gordy's career. Gordy and Williams also brought the success of the Miracle Violence Connection to the U.S., appearing in World Championship Wrestling through the summer and early fall of 1982. Gordy and Williams defeated Rick and Scott Steiner for the WCW World Tag Team Championship in Atlanta on July 5th, then added the NWA World Tag Team Championship on July 12th, and a tournament final over Barry Windham and Dustin Rhodes. Gordy and Williams held the unified titles until September 21st, when they dropped them to Windham and Rhodes on WCW Saturday Night. As WCW drew closer to completely severing their ties with the NWA, they entered into a working relationship with New Japan Pro Wrestling. Gordy and Williams chose to stay loyal to Giant Baba's All Japan promotion and began working exclusively for AJPW. On January 30th, 1993, Gordy and Williams won their last title together, winning the AJPW World Tag Team Championship for a fifth time over Super Generation Army in an incredible 27-minute match. They held the titles for 110 days, dropping them to Toshiaki Kawada and Akira Tao in Tokyo on May 20th. In August 1993, Gordy came back to the U.S., not to work, but just to spend time at home before going back to Japan. Over the years, the Fabulous Freebirds had a reputation for partying that was not just for show. They all liked to indulge, but by the early 1990s, it was becoming a major problem for Gordy. On one occasion in Japan, an intoxicated Gordy threw a fire extinguisher through the window of a bar. That and other incidents were not only beginning to wear thin with AJPW owner Giant Baba, but becoming a problem for his health. Most wrestlers took some kind of pain medication, but with Gordy's difficult traveling schedule, he began making use of sleeping pills. One story had Gordy taking 2 pills from a random woman, and when asked what they were, he simply said, "Orange ones." On August 18, 1993, Gordy and Steve Williams boarded a plane in the U.S. headed back to Japan. It's estimated Gordy took as many as 50 pills of varying strength. Gordy started to turn blue and stop breathing. Williams worked with Gordy trying to revive him until the plane landed, and he was rushed to the hospital. Terry was in a coma for 3 days, but would survive the incident. Unfortunately, he was never the same again. Terry suffered permanent brain damage and had to relearn how to walk and talk. Gordy didn't remember most of his career up to that point, and friends and family said the usual jovial Gordy was now quiet and distant. The bright look in his eyes was replaced with confusion. Amazingly, Gordy did return to the ring less than 5 months later, rejoining Michael Hayes and Jimmy Garvin as the Fabulous Freebirds in the Dallas-based Global Wrestling Federation. Gordy and Garvin even won the North American Tag Team Championship from Black Bart and John Hawk on June 3, 1994 at the Sportatorium, but it was obvious things weren't the same. Once considered a natural in the ring, Gordy now needed to be led through a match. Terry could still go through the motions, but the fire was gone. Gordy even returned to All Japan Pro Wrestling in the middle of July 1994, primarily tagging with Steve Williams and Richard Slinger, but his stay in AJPW would be short-lived. With his performance lacking, Gordy would have his last match in AJPW on July 28, 1994 in Tokyo, tagging with his nephew Richard Slinger and Kurt Bayer as they defeated Tom Zink, the Eagle, and Johnny Smith. Gordy returned to the GWF until that promotion folded in late 1994 and suddenly found himself unable to find work in pro wrestling. After 9 months, Jim Cornette gave Gordy a chance in Smoky Mountain Wrestling and helped give something of a resurgence to his career. Gordy even briefly held the SMW Heavyweight Championship and feuded with Brad Armstrong over the title. Gordy did return to Japan, appearing for the International Wrestling Association, a deathmatch promotion that was far from working for All Japan. There would be stints in the USWA, the CWA, and even ECW through 1996, before an old friend gave Gordy one more shot at a major promotion. Michael Hayes was working for the World Wrestling Federation and helped to bring Gordy in as the Executioner, a hooded wrestler aligned with Mankind and the former Percy Pringle, now portraying Paul Bearer. The gimmick didn't go over well, and Gordy returned to the IWA through the end of 1997. The year 1998 would be filled with small promotions in Japan and several appearances in Bad Boys of Wrestling, an indie promotion based in Bridgeport, Texas. Gordy's last appearance in the U.S. occurred on January 21, 2000 in Tulsa, Oklahoma, for Oklahoma Pro Wrestling. He tagged with Michael Hayes in a losing effort against Jeff and Matt Hardy. More than a year later, Terry Gordy had the last match of his career on the winning side of a 10-man tag team match in Yokohama, Japan, on February 4, 2001. 5 months later, at his home in Saudi Daisy, Tennessee, Terry Gordy passed away after suffering a heart attack caused by a blood clot. He was 40 years old. Terry Gordy passed away at a young age, but in less than 30 years lived more life than most people ever see. He was a natural, a wrestling prodigy putting butts in seats at an age that most young men haven't even had a job. Gordy's talent and dedication not only earned the respect of fans, but of the men he worked with in the ring. Gordy left a legacy that continued in the ring as well. His son Terry Ray Gordy Jr. had a decade-long career in wrestling, best known as Jesse Dalton and Slam Master Jay in the WWE. Terry's daughter Miranda Gordy is currently appearing in various indie promotions as of the making of this video. Terry Gordy's career sputtered to an end, but friends and fans alike prefer to remember the Terry Gordy that helped set the wrestling world on fire. The Terry Gordy that could take as well as he could give in the ring. The human torpedo. Bam Bam. The muscle of the Freebirds. Gordy is a true legend of the business, and is fondly remembered not only by world-class fans, but fans around the world.
That's right, Market Ranch. You know, everybody knows that I got the missing link next week, and everybody out there knows that they don't call him the missing link for nothing, because he is missing just a little bit upstairs. Hold on. But you know, I've dealt with people like the missing link before, people that's missing upstairs, and I don't mind, because see, I'm probably missing just a little bit myself.
I was about to say, sometimes you a court low yourself, brother.
You know, Skandor Akbar, he wants to come out here and run his mouth and talk about how I should be in an asylum somewhere. Well, you're probably right, Akbar, and don't you ever forget that either. I probably should be, but come next week, Jack, we're gonna see who belongs in the asylum, if the missing link or Terry Gordy. We're gonna get crazy right here in Fort Worth.